Hey folks, Dumac the Artist coming at you once again from my hidden bunker deep within the bowels of the city, and I'm making this video response to Wagter. In response to his question about gun ownership here in the United States. So I'm going to give you a very brief answer. So in the hopes that perhaps, we could have a conversation about this. One of the things that you do need to keep in mind is that here in the United States, our Constitution basically provides the average American citizen the right to protect himself with a gun, with arms, whatever, the right to bear arms. The reason for this was that the Founding Fathers came up with the possibility that someone would find their way around the Constitution and create a tyranny, or just completely chuck the Constitution altogether. You get the idea. And basically the modus operandi here was so that the last thing a tyrant would want to look at if he was going to try and take over the United States is a well-armed populace, especially if they're crazy enough to use those guns and fight against oppression. So for the most part, we haven't had a problem with tyrants here in the United States, with a couple of exceptions, and even then they were eventually voted out of office or impeached, or taken care of. But that's altogether not relevant to the conversation. Because we have the Second Amendment, the problem is that Americans do not like the idea of losing any rights whatsoever. They don't care if it's in the Constitution. If it says we can have it, Americans want to keep it for the most part, with a few notable exceptions. So because of this, it's been very difficult to get any kind of sane, rational gun control laws on the books, at least in terms of the federal level. Personally, I don't think it's ever going to happen, because no politician in their right mind is ever going to touch gun control, especially with the lobbies that are in place, but that's something else altogether. Now, in Europe, I can understand your confusion, because in Europe, guns, we don't need them. People are a little bit different there. People are a little more cultured, a little more civilized, a little more rational. But you have to keep in mind that Americans are knucking futs, and because they're knucking futs, they're not necessarily going to operate with the same level of reason and logic. You kind of have to walk them through slowly into the idea of, maybe not needing a gun. Now, there are cities here in the United States that do have very strict gun laws. There are states here that have very strict gun laws. But for the most part, criminals get guns anyway. Which is why a lot of gun advocates will say, well, why should only the criminals have guns when we should have guns to defend ourselves? Again, no matter how you slice it, Americans do not like the concept of A, losing their rights, like I said before, and B, they don't like the concept of unfairness. If criminals have to have guns, then people have to have guns. If the cops are not going to do their job in certain neighborhoods, which they have been known not to do, it makes sense for the population to have some form of protection available to them. You have to keep in mind also is that here in the United States, cops won't go into certain neighborhoods for various reasons. And they're very slow to enforce laws in certain neighborhoods for various reasons. It makes sense for certain areas that you need to have something to protect yourself. Anyway, I'm sorry if I'm rambling on a little bit, But essentially, the gist of the conversation boils down to Americans don't like the concept of losing their rights, and Americans hate the concept of unfairness. And because of our mindset, we have a problem with finding that nice, happy medium between responsible gun ownership and what we had here today. Anyway, those are my thoughts. This is Dumark the Artist signing off. Slanchini Falcha. Have a nice day.